Welcome to the Golden Gems podcast. Today, we're taking a deep dive into Kalief Browder, the Bronx teenager, whose tragic 3-year incarceration at Rikers Island without a trial exposed the catastrophic and ongoing failures of the pretrial detention system.
And to really grasp the gravity of this, you have to confront the raw metrics right up front. I mean, we were talking about a kid who spent roughly 800 days in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
He endured documented physical abuse and ultimately lost his life over an entirely unproven accusation about a stolen backpack.
Right, and I think what's vital for us to establish today is that this isn't just some dark, closed chapter in criminal justice history.
No, absolutely not.
It's a forensic examination of a system that is operating at this very moment. It's March 2026, and the machinery that trapped him is still legally trapping thousands of people today.
Exactly. The bureaucratic loopholes, the financial incentives keeping these facilities open, they're all fully functional right now. The promises to close Rikers Island have completely derailed.
So let's unpack this from the beginning. Because you don't just wake up in a cell at Rikers. The path is usually paved long before you even realize you're on it.
It is. Kalief was born on May 25, 1993, in the Bronx, and he was born into a system that was, frankly, already stacked against him.
Right, his biological mother struggled with severe chemical dependency.
Yeah, which meant Kalief was swept into the Child Protective Services system almost from day one. He was the youngest of 7 siblings, moved through foster care, and was eventually adopted by Venida Browder.
Which establishes this foundational trauma of familial separation early on. There's this silent psychological undercurrent of instability long before he ever encounters the police.
Precisely. And then you have to factor in the geographic context. Growing up in the Bronx during the late 2000s and early 2010s was basically existing in a pressure cooker.
Oh, absolutely. It was a hyper-surveilled environment. Simply walking down the street required this intense defensive posture.
Right. For a young minority male just trying to exist, the aggressive law enforcement doctrines of that era meant every single interaction with authority carried the potential for catastrophic escalation.
It's like navigating a maze where the walls are constantly shifting. And growing up in that specific zip code, a single wrong turn, even an imagined one, triggers a trapdoor you can literally never climb out of.
That is exactly what happened. That theoretical trapdoor became a literal reality in May 2010.
Right. He's walking home through the Belmont neighborhood with a friend. It's late. A New York City Police Department cruiser pulls up.
And the sheer lack of evidence here is just staggering. An individual sitting in the back of that cruiser claims a backpack containing valuables had been stolen weeks prior.
Weeks prior.
Yeah, weeks prior.
Right.
And he just points at a 16-year-old Kalief on the street.
The officers get out. They conduct an immediate physical search right there, and they find nothing. No backpack, no stolen valuables, zero physical or forensic evidence linking him to any crime.
But despite that total void of corroboration, he's handcuffed, he's processed and hit with robbery, grand larceny, and assault charges.
The psychological shock of that is terrifying. Going from a free kid walking home to a captive of the state in minutes. So he goes before a judge for arraignment, and bail is set at $3,000.
Right.
Now, looking at the legal mechanics here, even in poor neighborhoods, families often pool cash or go to a bail bondsman. So you'd think the Browder family could just get a bond for a few $100 and get him out.
You would think so, but the bail amount was essentially an illusion. Kalief was trapped by a secondary mechanism called a probation hold.
The fatal catch.
Yeah.
Because of a prior alleged joyride incident, right?
Exactly. He had prior contact with the justice system involving a delivery truck joyride, resulting in probation. So the moment he was arrested for this unproven backpack charge, the Department of Probation placed an automatic hold on him.
Meaning that $3,000 didn't even matter.
It wouldn't have mattered if they had $3 million in cash. A probation hold legally allows the state to detain you pending a violation hearing, entirely regardless of your bail status on the new charge.
And the burden of proof shifts dramatically there. For a criminal trial, it's beyond a reasonable doubt, but for a probation violation, merely being accused of a new crime triggers the hold.
Exactly. So the narrative that he was simply held because his family was poor is incomplete. The state had strategically stacked the legal deck against him. The bail was a decoy, but the probation hold was the lock.
That is just infuriating. So unable to buy his freedom, he's physically transported across the bridge to Rikers Island. At 16, he ceases to be a human being and transitions into a case file.
And we need to paint a picture of what he was walking into. Rikers is a 413-acre complex on the East River. It's an environment meticulously designed to dehumanize.
Yeah, the physical decay alone was dangerous.
Broken toilets, extreme temperature fluctuations. Detainees were literally fashioning weapons from plexiglass and metal ripped directly from the crumbling buildings.
And while he's trying to survive that, his case gets assigned to the Bronx District Attorney's office. This brings us to the most legally appalling bureaucratic mechanism in this whole story.
New York Criminal Procedure Law, Section 30.30.
Right, the ready rule. It's supposed to guarantee a speedy trial within 6 months for felony charges. But the prosecutors found a way to manipulate time itself.
They did. Under the ready rule, ready for trial doesn't mean a jury is seated. It simply means the prosecutor files a document, a certificate of readiness, saying they are theoretically prepared.
And the moment they file that piece of paper, the 6-month speedy trial clock completely stops ticking.
Exactly. The Bronx prosecutors would file the certificate, freezing the clock. Then, at the very next court appearance, they would stand before the judge and declare they were suddenly not ready.
Usually claiming they couldn't locate their witness, right?
Right, and they would ask the judge for a short adjournment, typically just 1 week.
But because of massive court congestion, a requested 1-week delay would result in the next court date being scheduled 6 weeks away.
Sometimes 2 months away. But because of how the law was interpreted, only that one requested week counted against the prosecutor's 6-month deadline.
So the remaining 5 or 7 weeks of delay simply evaporated from the legal record. They completely weaponized the calendar.
Kalief went through this cycle over 30 times. He appeared before judges dozens of times just to hear the people are not ready, and then he'd be sent right back across the bridge.
Over 30 times. That's 3 years of his life stolen by administrative delays. And after 2.5 years, they finally crack and offer him a plea deal.
They tell him he can walk out that day if he pleads guilty to a lesser charge.
But he refused. He categorically refused to take a plea deal for a crime he didn't commit. He wouldn't validate their corrupt process.
Which is an incredible act of defiance for a teenager. But the punishment for insisting on his constitutional right to a trial was brutal.
Yeah, the retaliation was 800 days in solitary confinement, the Bing.
A 6 by 9 foot concrete cell, 23 hours a day of total sensory deprivation and isolation.
I mean, the United Nations explicitly classifies prolonged solitary confinement exceeding 15 days as a form of torture.
Right, so applying 800 days of it to a developing adolescent brain is neurologically catastrophic.
It induces intense hallucinations and deep paranoia. And when he wasn't in solitary, the violence was rampant. We've all seen the surveillance footage of correction officers violently beating him while he was handcuffed.
He was repeatedly assaulted by other inmates, too, to the point of hospitalization. The system didn't just fail to protect him, it actively facilitated his abuse.
Until finally, in June 2013, the accuser miraculously disappears. The Bronx DA's office quietly drops all charges.
Offering absolutely no explanation for where this critical witness had been during the previous 30-plus adjournments, there was simply no case.
So Kalief walks out of Rikers at 20 years old, having lost his foundational adolescent years. But the tragic reality is that he remained trapped in an invisible cell built by the state.
The psychological wreckage was profound. He exhibited severe PTSD, extreme hypervigilance.
He would lock himself in his childhood bedroom, right?
Yeah, he would purposefully recreate the exact dimensions and isolation of his solitary cell. The unstructured expanse of the free world was just too terrifying for his brain to process.
Despite that, his heroic fight to reclaim his life was staggering. He passed his high school equivalency exam. He enrolled at Bronx Community College and earned a 3.56 GPA.
He was sitting in college classrooms, analyzing texts, while battling the cognitive demons installed by the Department of Correction.
And he bravely shared his story with The New Yorker, exposing the truth and forcing the public to see that surveillance footage.
But the internal damage was terminal. The state broke his mind and left him to navigate the wreckage alone. On June 6, 2015, 22-year-old Kalief took his own life.
And looking at the unbroken chain of causality here, framing this merely as a suicide ignores the mechanics of what happened.
Absolutely. This was a delayed execution by the New York City criminal justice system.
And the collateral damage tore through his family. Just 16 months later, his mother, Venida Browder, passed away from heart disease.
What her family rightly called a broken heart. She fought relentlessly for him, and the system broke her too.
Which brings us to the legacy and the vault of promises made in the wake of this undeniable tragedy, because there was massive public outrage.
There was. In 2019, the city settled a civil lawsuit with the Browder family, for $3.3 million.
The grotesque irony of that number, it amounts to exactly $3,000 for every single day he was incarcerated.
The precise bail his family couldn't afford on day one? They paid him back the ransom with state funds after the hostage was already dead.
Culturally, it sparked a massive shift. President Obama signed an executive order banning solitary for juveniles federally, citing Kalief. Jay-Z produced a documentary in 2017.
But when you look at actual legislative reform, the structural inertia of the system wins out.
Yeah, let's talk about Kalief's law. It was supposed to fix the ready rule loophole.
Right. It would have required courts to actually verify that prosecutors were prepared before stopping the clock. But looking at the data from March 2026, that promise has proven entirely hollow.
Because it stalled in the state Senate.
Exactly. It remains unpassed today. Prosecutors can still manipulate the speedy trial clock just like they did in 2010.
So the core legal mechanisms of caging, the trial delays, cash bail, probation holds, they are all fully operational right now.
Which brings us to the forensic reality of Rikers Island today. In 2019, the City Council legally mandated the closure of Rikers by 2027.
With an initial budget of $8.7 billion. But we are sitting here in early 2026, and that 2027 deadline is completely dead.
The delay is total. The replacement jails are pushed to 2031 or 2032, and the costs have exploded from $8.7 billion to over $15 billion.
So why is the political will so weak? Who is benefiting from this?
You have to look at the bureaucratic incentives. Specifically, the Correction Officers Union, COBA, they've fought closure at every step.
Right, because of the overtime financials.
Exactly. In 2024 alone, the Department of Correction paid out $283 million in overtime bonuses.
$283 million.
Yeah. When you have guards making massive amounts of money purely through the overtime caused by a chaotic, understaffed jail, fixing the jail means destroying their business model.
There is an entrenched financial incentive to maintain the dysfunction. And the human cost of that status quo is horrifying.
As of early 2026, there are 7,000 inmates currently housed there.
And 85% of them are legally innocent, unconvicted, trapped in the exact same pretrial limbo that claimed Kalief.
And the violence hasn't stopped. There have been 48 deaths since 2022. The system has failed so entirely that the federal government finally stepped in.
Right, breaking news from January 2026, a federal judge appointed former CIA officer Nicholas Deml to take control of Rikers.
We are now looking at a facility under federal receivership because the city proved entirely incapable of managing it without mass constitutional violations.
We're closing the vault on the facts today, but we have to leave you with this heavy present-day reality.
The machinery is still running.
Exactly. If 85% of the 7,000 people sitting in Rikers Island today are legally innocent, trapped by the exact same loopholes, probation holds, and cash bail requirements that killed Kalief Browder, you have to ask yourself a question.
Is the constitutional presumption of innocence in America actually a right?
Or is it simply a luxury good, available only to those with enough liquid capital to purchase it?
It's something we all need to mull over.
Thank you for listening to the Golden Gems podcast. We'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep listening, and keep celebrating the power of uncompromising voices.